Good evening and welcome to the Watchmen'S Report. I'm Cody Higley, and tonight, as always, we're joined by Robert Landon and Jason Foreman. Jason won't be appearing on screen, but rest assured, for all you ladies out there, he is on the show tonight. Jay, go ahead and say hi to everybody.
What's going on, guys? It's been a crazy week, so I look like death, but I'll be on tomorrow night when Ralph's on so we can talk nerdy.
Yeah, definitely tune in tomorrow night for our guest, Ralph Smith, the Republican councilman, at-large councilman, soon to be representing the Third Ward. We've got a lot to talk about. There was yet another crazy meeting of Marion City Council last night. As far as substantive topics that went on last night, wasn't a whole lot, but there were a lot of passions, a lot of people in the crowd, and we'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about the auditor of the state of Ohio releasing the results of the fiscal distress analysis for the city of Marion that was requested by Mayor Bill Collins back in the last week of October. So that report has been released. It was released today, but amazingly, even though it said that it was at a release date of November 25th, certain individuals in the city of Marion got it the day before. So I guess it's good to have friends in high places or something. I don't know, but we'll go over that report as well. And in fact, I think that's probably a good place to start, boys, is to kind of explain to people. We really haven't touched on that. We've talked about it a little bit, but if you go to the Auditor of State's website, there's information on what that means to request a fiscal distress analysis, and then the three stages or three levels that a municipality can be found to be in from a fiscal. And some of you out there, fiscal is financial, so budgetary, talking money. So when it comes to the money situation in the city of Marion, the auditor of state has determined that it's in a fiscal caution. So, Jay, if you want to pull that up for the folks from the auditor page with the different levels and the information on that, we'll start with that. Okay. So again, this is from the Auditor of State's website. So anybody can go here, check it out. And as you can see, when a local government encounters budgetary problems, it may be placed in fiscal caution, fiscal watch, or fiscal emergency status. So the worst situation that you can be in is to be in that fiscal emergency. Kind of the middle ground is the fiscal watch, and the introductory or the first stage is the fiscal caution. So let's look over the fiscal caution, which is again what Marion is currently in. And let's read that. Is there a bullet point above that, Jay? Okay. So any one factor is needed for the auditor of state to declare a fiscal caution. When the auditor of state declares that a municipal corporation, county, or township's financial records are unauditable and has issued a letter to the entity indicating the time frame under which those records must be restored to an auditable condition, and the entity has failed to do so within that time frame. Okay, so they just released the financial audit for the city of Marion for the year 2021, and even though they've been working, they have not been able to make much in the way of progress. And here we are entering 2026. So, second bullet point, when the auditor of state identifies significant deficiencies or material weaknesses over accounting and financial reporting functions, direct and material noncompliance with applicable laws and regulations, or management letter comments about issues that, in the opinion of the auditor of state, have a significant effect on the financial condition of the municipal corporation, county, or township. Okay, so that's all boxes checked. So we know this has been an ongoing problem. When a deficit fund when a deficit fund balance exists at year end in the general fund that is more than 2% of that fund's revenue for that year, yes. And or when a deficit fund balance exists at a year end in any other fund that is more than 2% of that fund's revenue for that year, and there are not sufficient resources in the general fund that may be transferred to eliminate the deficit, or in any other fund that may lawfully transfer resources to eliminate the deficit. Now, the word is, and we don't even know how reliable these figures are. Again, we're talking about the reporting issues that we've been stressing, and we even found additional citations from council minutes from the years 2023, 2024, letters from Veritas, who was the third party consultant firm that the city hired to come in and try to reconcile the books. We've published on that here this week, where it would run a report and it would give them figures, and then they would rerun the exact report, not changing any of the parameters, and it would give them entirely different figures. And by Veritas's accounts, the discrepancies could be substantial. So how in the hell are you supposed to balance your books? How are you supposed to do anything if that is what the system is returning as far as a result? So Jay's brought up here the recent article that kind of talks about those things. Again, it's in the I think it was November of 2023, if I recall off the top of my head.
That's correct.
When that Veritas letter was sent out, and they had a lot of problems. I mean, there were chronic system issues that were identified by them, by Charles Harris, who was a accounting firm that they hired prior to Veritas. So go on to marionwatch.com, read these articles. There's a lot of information. A lot of them kind of appear to be a little bit overwhelming, I think, for some people. But if you really want to get a firm grasp and understanding of what's going on, why we are where we are, and what has been a chronic issue since the installation of the New World software in July of 2009, then you got to check this stuff out. And if you want to go back to the fiscal caution bullets there, we'll round that subject out. Okay, so again, 13 funds allegedly have negative balances. So these are largely going to be departments. So that is applicable here for the fiscal caution. So when a low year-end carryover balance exists in the general fund such that the balance is equal to or less than an amount representing 1 month of expenditures based on 1/12 of prior year expenditures, and or when a low year-end carryover balance exists in any other fund such that the balance is equal to or less than the amount representing 1 month of expenditures based on 1/12 of one prior year expenditures, and there are not sufficient resources in the general fund that may be transferred or in any other fund that may be lawfully transfer resources to subsidize the fund. Okay, so that's the other question that the city of Marion has, and how much money do they actually have in long-term investments, in carryover, what people would say is their savings. So if it's your household and you look at a budget, think of it this way. You spent $100 and you only had income coming in of $80. You have a deficiency of $20 between your expenditures and your revenues. So if you've got $50 in your savings account, you can take 20 out of that to go ahead and balance things out. So the question is, how much do we actually have in carryover? How much cash do we have in the old savings account? And honestly, I don't think that, I mean, they know what the bank balances are, but the problem is they haven't had any reconciliation between the bank to book, figures for quite some time. Is that how you understand it, Robert?
Not entirely. So, what they mean by there's been no reconciliation is that there's been no reconciliation according to the method that is prescribed by the Ohio Auditor of State. So, when we came in office, we were not aware of a specific method that they had preferred. So, what Perry Payne had done as my internal auditor was he would track every expenditure and receipt on Excel, obviously, because the bank reconciliation module did not work in New World. So he used an Excel spreadsheet to track every revenue and every expenditure from New World and matched it up to make sure that exact dollar amount was showing up on the bank statements. And there was huge manila folders about that thick for every month that he did. So yes, reconciliations were being done as far as they were matching expenditures from New World to the bank, but they were not matching them to particular funds. Meaning, if an expenditure came out of a particular special revenue fund or was supposed to come out of that, they wanted you to document in your reconciliation that that was tied to that particular fund. Instead of just saying, okay, we know this transaction happened on our books and it also happened on our bank. So again, that's the misconception there. Again, we did not do it according to their prescribed method, but we did do it. Now in 2021, what had happened was when Carson left after his whole thing that went down. When he left, we were shorthanded, so we didn't have the people, and then we were dealing with, they were fighting us with the union, and so our opponents kept us busy with everything else. Obviously, not making excuses. We were short staffed. We didn't have the resources to be able to do it. And then the fact that the state audit, we were behind with that because we couldn't get the contract approval on time. So it's really kind of like a perfect storm. But it is a misconception. There were reconciliations being done, just not to the proper method the state auditor wanted.
And that was all during COVID as well, right?
Yeah, COVID, well, we were in the office, so it wasn't that. It was just you had all kinds of stuff going on. We had political battles we were fighting. We had COVID. You had COVID grant money. That was a whole situation, and then the whole fight over the IRS mistake and rectifying that. So again, we did the reconciliations, just not to the method that they wanted to. And then we did have several months where we were not able to do any reconciliations because we didn't have the staff designated to do that.
Mr. Landon?
Yeah.
Just before you guys move on, now it is factual that you were not aware of the severity or that there were any kind of software issues even after you left office. I mean, other than what we had been talking about as suspicions since late 2017. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and so this is where the city finds itself, is in this first level of fiscal distress. Now, whether or not it was a situation where they could have been placed at this point in fiscal watch, go ahead and go down one, Jay, would you? Okay, so fiscal caution is anybody's guess. It might be a situation where the auditor is allowing the city a certain amount of time to try to rectify some of the issues on its own without advancing that status. Not sure what the truth is with that, but wait a minute, this is at the beginning, isn't it?
But what's interesting though is like how the state auditor's office completely sidesteps like their responsibility in this whole process too. They had staffing issues in 2021. Everybody did. It was just a unique time with COVID. And so that's what prompted the 2021 audit not being completed on time. That audit should have been done by May 31st. That's the statutory deadline. Unless you have extenuating circumstances, you can request extensions on 30-day basis, which we obviously did. And had the Democrats on council approved our private contract with J&G, we would have completed it on time. So then it resulted again in August of 2021, the audit didn't even get started. So, and then they were approaching I want to say it was September 30th was the deadline for the S&P bond financial report to make sure that you submit your financial statements to show proof that you're still bond eligible and you can, get a good rating. And that really pushed us back. So again, it's just weird how like they won't say like, hey, we kind of contributed to this. We had staffing issues. We weren't able to provide you the service. Not to mention the fact that we weren't able to pull these reports till August resulted in things going wonky too, because they couldn't get the data from utility billing off of New World. So again, kind of like a perfect storm of things coming together and really working against us.
Yeah, it kind of was a perfect storm, and a lot of lingering system issues, which a big one was just rectified October 27th with that general ledger override authority.
Yeah,
And
and I
how much
started tracking that, and you know this because you're in the chats, but we started tracking that overspending non-appropriated funds, which is illegal, by the way. And we can see a sharp curve after 2008, which indicates to me as an IT professional that has been like that for pretty much, I'm guessing, the entire installation or close to it of the New World system. Now, I'd never know that unless I could get my hands on the logs, but that's what the actual forensic IT audit would uncover. This $5,000 general controls audit or spot check audit is not a forensic audit. That is the incorrect terminology.
let's talk about that when we're talking about the council meeting,
Yeah. So
since it did come up, but not let's finish up with this here. Then we'll talk about the council meeting, and since that was a topic of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so City of Marion is in fiscal caution, according to the Auditor of State. So this section here tells you the process and the hopeful termination. We want this issue to be resolved. We want the City of Marion to be able to fix the problems that it's currently facing so that everybody can move forward. So once the Auditor of State has determined that the entity will be placed in fiscal caution, which it did, just released that yesterday, the governing body will receive written notice of the declaration. This notification will also request a written proposal from the entity for discontinuing or correcting the fiscal practice or budgetary conditions that prompted the declaration. The entity will be given 60 days to provide the proposal to the Auditor of State. Okay, so Marion, it was released today. They've got 60 days to come up with a plan. So what does that put us on? January 25th.
Yeah.
Maybe the 24th, depending on when they actually officially, but that's when it was posted. The release date was today. So let's say they got 60 days, got till January 25th to write something up, to put a plan together, and to provide it to the auditor of state. Scroll down, Jay, if you would. The auditor of state may visit and inspect the entity under fiscal caution and may provide technical assistance to the entity in implementing proposals to eliminate the conditions that prompted the fiscal caution declaration. Costs for this support would be borne by the state. Okay, so they're going to have a lifeline there. Technical assistance, try to advise Marion on what they think they need to do. So that's good. And if the entity has not made reasonable proposals or otherwise taken action to correct the practices or conditions that led to the declaration of fiscal caution, the auditor of state may determine that the entity should be placed in a state of fiscal watch, that's level 2, or fiscal emergency, that's level 3. Scroll down if you would, sir. An entity cannot be released from fiscal caution until the auditor of state has determined that the corrective actions have been or are being implemented and that the fiscal caution conditions no longer exist. So chances are probably pretty good that Marion will be in fiscal caution for a good amount of time. Now, I'm going to relay that to the fire station issue. I think we can probably segue from this to that here briefly. The reason that the fire station was put on hold, and as well the big sewer project they had planned for North Prospect Street, was because they have no bond rating. So they don't want to spend a bunch of money on high bond payments because, you know, they said they could find somebody, most likely, even though they're in fiscal caution. They could probably have found a lender. They probably could have secured, but they would not have been good terms at all. So that's like you, if you have a good credit score, if your credit score is 800 and you go to the bank and you say, hey, I want a loan on a house or a car or whatever, they're going to say, oh, you're a good credit risk. So we're going to give you well, nowadays, let's say a 5% loan. Say it's a car, brand new car, 5%, you got good credit, you get the best rate that we can offer you. Now, let's say you have a 580 credit score, you may find a lender who will lend you the money to buy that car, but instead of getting 5%, that lender may give you 10% or 12%. Not good terms. So therefore your payments are much higher and you're not going to be able to get the bang for the buck, because when that was a levy that was passed for the fire station, so there's a finite amount of money that it can generate. And if they don't get advantageous terms, then they're not going to be able to get as much in the way of a fire station. Right, Robert?
Correct. And so the bond situation again was because we didn't file our bond reports on time, and then it created a snowball effect. But I mean, let's be honest. I mean, how much more bonds should the city be issuing? I mean, they're already in debt up to their eyeballs. I mean, it's not really a smart move to be taking on more debt That's also why they tried to do the fire levy and that passed, is because they wanted their own funding mechanisms to not rely on, issuing more bonds. And that was before all of this stuff really was coming to fruition.
Yeah, because that levy for the fire station was passed in 2022, right?
I think so. 2022, maybe 2023, it was towards the end
I
of,
think I think it was like, yeah, I think it was 2022. I think I pulled it up the other day just to make sure. I think it was November of 2022, I think.
right.
But yeah, you it was that the most prudent thing to do. And that was proposed by the fire chief, Chuck Dean, but it would have been something that council, Mayor Scott Scherzer, you know, you're
Mhm.
talking about a huge investment like that.
Yeah.
And sure, the station there on is that the one that's on Prospect or
Mhm.
Church?
South
Yeah,
Prospect. Mhm.
yeah. I know it was old, 1912. Um,
It is
but
old.
yeah, I mean it's old. I'm sure it probably did need a lot of work, a lot of updates. I'm
Mhm.
sure it had been taken care of throughout the years. So you never know just how uh, necessary or how much expediency there is in a lot of government expenditures like that. Maybe it was absolutely needed. I don't know, but it was kind of a questionable timing, I would say, to do something like that. Again, when you know that the city's finances are in question. And it's the same thing with fire truck or any of these major expenditures. It may not be the best time to pursue it. It should be all hands on deck trying to resolve, trying to figure out the issues that you're facing because they were well aware of them. And there again, that begs the question. This is something that Mayor Bill Collins reached out to the auditor of state to request this fiscal distress analysis. Well, that was fall of, I don't know when he actually reached out. I think it was October. Yeah, I think it was October, right around October 27th. He reached out and 2025. So if everybody out there is saying, oh, well, it's been a mess since June of 2020, definitely since the spring of 2021, if that's your argument, why didn't Mayor Scherzer reach out
Right.
in the fall of 2021, you know, for this analysis? Um, didn't didn't
Right.
do it. So now here we are. We've had this general ledger override authority. We haven't really had a firm grasp on any amount of our financials for quite a while, and nobody's done anything about it.
Well,
Is it
and
because you don't want it to look bad to say, oh well, I had to request a fiscal distress analysis, and that might subject me to criticism? What do you think, Robert, on that?
we've reached such like an impasse that it's not sustainable. And I'm not just talking financially, I'm talking politically, because like things are just reaching to a boiling point where both sides are just incredibly frustrated at the other. And all of a sudden they're talking about, well, all we care about is solutions and you guys just want to point fingers. It's like we just came online with our show like what, a couple months ago, and you guys were pointing fingers for 4, 5, 6 years now, placing blame and deflecting blame as well. So they're not owning up to their own issues. I mean, radically defended Kelly Carr and Schertzer like God. They've not had any issues whatsoever. And it's just completely blatantly false. And until they can come to the table and admit as such, it's really hard to have healthy dialogue. And that's what they're not understanding. They're saying that we're being, a little aggressive now, and the memes and stuff. And yeah, we're having fun with it. It's politics. They did this as well. But at the same time, if you want us to have honest dialogues with you, then you have to admit your own mistakes. And this is the exact same criticism that these people have given me for years. And so they're not being intellectually honest. They would rather actually attack your character and your family and all those things. They would rather do that than just stick to the politics, stick to, hey, you're stupid. You think that we shouldn't give out SNAP benefits, or you think this. And so that's why we are where we are, because we can't have honest conversations without coming at each other's throats. And that's why I said when I first started running for charter commission, before things started heating up again, because I know Marion politics, hey, let's put the swords down. Let's do, let's have dialogue. And as soon as I came back in, they didn't like that. And the attacks came back. So for people listening today, what would you expect people to do who are just constantly being attacked? They're going to fight back. You're not going to enter into a match and not fight back. It would be folly to do so. And so as Jay's showing here right now, we're actually getting ready to dispel another myth here. I think Councilman Schauber, unfortunately, is the one that has kind of spread this and been the primary person on this, that we only have $5 million in cash. Again, honest conversations, right? Blatantly out there saying that we've only got, you can go on to Sean Spears' radio station and see his comments and his interview saying we only have $5 million. This treasurer's report is October 2025. So a month ago. And is that my eyes are bad. 9.9. Is that 9.9, $10 million?
Yeah, this is the January. You want me to go back to the other one?
Yeah, if you could go back to October's, please.
Yep.
9 million.
Yeah, 9.9.
Okay. So let's just call it 10. So we have $10 million in the bank. Okay. Double what he's claiming. But what, 6-7 million less than what they said we had when Schertzer was here. And that is true. I remember that. We had, thankfully, to our income tax collection methods at that time and being fair, we had record revenues, or at least higher revenues than my predecessor for income tax collection. And so we had pretty healthy carryovers. But the problem is there was a lot of spending that was actually happening that didn't actually hit your books those last few years. Democrats had majority council. They had the mayor's office. They had the law director's office. So majority Democrat, right? And they're buying fire trucks. They're buying ambulances. They're buying police cruisers. They're doing major infrastructure projects. And we can debate the necessity of all that. I'm not getting into that right now, but we're just sticking to the facts. When you have we haven't finished investigating, Cody. We might even be up to maybe $6 million in expenses from the Schertzer administration. Yeah, you're going to be down to 10 million. Now let's bring it back to the Collins administration. Okay, we can debate the car wraps, or the bus wraps. We can debate the car wrap factory stuff. We can debate signs or whatever. But those expenses do not equate to $1 million, $4 million that is putting us in a fiscal caution. There's no way that the Collins administration has just went on a rampant spending spree. We haven't seen it yet. If we see it, we will speak to that. But the evidence isn't there yet. The evidence so far from what we're seeing on the reporting is that this is really coming over from the Schertzer administration. So we just need to have honest conversation. That's what we're trying to do today with what Jay is showing on the screen.
Yeah, so here's the 2023. You guys are way faster at this than I am. I could probably stumble through it, but we have a treasurer's balance of 14.8 million. And then as you go through to, I got to get it. Hang on a minute. 2023. So we're going to go back. 14.8. And that is pretty steady. And then you get to 2025, which is October of 2025. You have 9.9 mil.
Okay, so here's, as I understand it, they're projecting what? A deficit of 5 million. So they're trying to say that they'll be down to 4.5, $5 million.
Right. And then if you
So,
look at the one from January of 25, which is right after they took office, it's 11.8.
yeah, so they've got,
Next year, yeah.
that's why they're talking about the necessity of cuts in the budget, is because they were, I think the proposed budget for 26 was expenses of 19.7, and then I think revenues were roughly 16 or 15 and some change, something like that, if I recall. So because they need to make sure that they preserve enough money in the carryover, that's why they're proposing. Right now it's at 10%. That's the starting point, is that all these different um, City of Marion departments are supposed, their heads are supposed to be looking into their department budgets and cutting 10%. So they'll get those results. I think the word, if I recall from Mayor Collins, is that those figures are due back to him by tomorrow,
I
by
think so.
Wednesday the 26th.
Yeah.
So then they'll see where they're at. So if it's 19.7 or 19.8 and 10%, then you're talking 1.97 or 1.98 million dollars in cuts. So you'll still be at a deficit if that's what they stick with, but you've preserved another 1.97 or 1.98
Yeah.
in your carryover funds. So the question is, will additional cuts be necessary within certain departments? If you look at the budget expenditures by department, the historical expenditures, historical revenues, there's certain departments that have been managed well, I would say,
Mhm.
that their increases over the past 6 years have been very modest in this inflationary environment that we found ourselves since COVID, since they printed trillions and trillions of dollars, and it's just continued. I mean, that's just the reality. Every time that uh, you got one of those COVID stimulus payments, your purchasing power plummeted precipitously. And we find ourselves today, what, $37 trillion in national debt. Costs are skyrocketing across the board. This country is not in a good fiscal shape, all in all. So these departments have had to manage things in this inflationary environment that we find ourselves. Well, fortunately, wages, because it's inflation, wages have gone up. They haven't gone up with the rate of inflation. They haven't gone up with the consumer price index. Um, so you're losing ground. Almost everybody is, but they have gone up. So you will see the overall receipts of income taxes largely increase, or at least stay stable. They did in what, 2023, Robert? They removed that credit, or gave the credit, for people who work outside of the city, of 0.5% off the city's 2% income tax on earned income.
Sorry.
So it did have an impact, but we've seen in this inflationary environment, your overall wages go up per capita. Um, the other thing is property tax values. You know, everybody go look at realtor.com. Look at what the average house is listed at or selling for. Look at your property tax bills from the Marion County Auditor. In a 5-6 year period, your assessed value, what you're paying property taxes on,
Mhm.
have increased 50-60%.
Well, and let's talk
It's
about.
a tremendous increase.
Well, you made a good point, Cody. The 0.5% tax rebate if you work out of the city, was that a smart decision? Might have had noble intentions to give some people relief and try to make it more equitable and fair, but without some sort of cuts or some sort of revenue to replace it, there's obviously going to be a tipping of the balance there, right? I mean, where was the
I mean,
discussion?
exactly. And that was what, 2023 that
Mhm.
they did that. Okay. And I'm all in favor. I mean, I've made it pretty clear that the primary driver of economic development is the private sector. It is private capital investment. It's the free market. It's all that good stuff. That's when this
You're not a
country.
socialist, Cody?
No, I'm not a socialist. I'm not in favor of government run grocery stores like certain individuals are in the city of Marion. But I won't digress. I won't go on a rant about Mondami and the government run uh, uh, grocery stores. That's not my thing. Um, but no, the country was its most prosperous historically. If you look at economic history, if you don't believe me, just drive around Marion. Look at when all these houses were built. Look when all these commercial buildings were built. They were built around the turn of the century. It's when people had money. You didn't have an income tax. You didn't have a city income tax. You didn't have a state income tax. You didn't have a federal income tax. You didn't have sales tax. You didn't have social security tax. You didn't have all this stuff. People had money. They could go out and build a place. You had a regulatory environment that was conducive, kind of a very minimal approach. It's small government. So now we have big government. Now we have all these taxes. Um,
Right.
that's the world that we live in. But they should have realized you can go on the Federal Reserve's chart. You can go on all these official government Bureau of Labor Statistics, you name it, and you can look up and see every little aspect charted out for you as far as price increases, CPI, producers price index, you name whatever metric you want to look at, the Federal Reserve will publish it. They quantified it. And that should have been very clear that it was clear to the former budget director, Tacey Courtright. She made it very clear last year when they were having discussions of the transit fare increases, a very modest increase
Mhm.
for a department that is losing its ass. So much so that if you take the total budget expenditures, the total expenses of Marion area transit, and you divide that by the number of service miles that their transit vehicles go in a year to figure out a per mile cost, how much
Right.
how much does it cost?
It was
$10,
$10.
almost $10 a mile. That is insanity.
Cody, tell us,
Insanity.
because even you know this, right? You weren't in government finance, but you know enough. You probably could be a government finance official. What is an enterprise fund? Why don't you define that? Because maybe some people don't fully understand how they should be operating.
Well, I was corrected on transit not being an enterprise. I think it's a special revenue fund. They
Right.
get transit gets its money from not only grants, uh, but also fares, and then they operated in a deficit So then the general fund had to bail them out, and that's how they've been operating. And it stands to reason when, if you look at they published in 2023 the number of service hours. So they give you service mileage for the year, they give you service hours for the year, they also give you total ridership. So when you crunch those numbers, they had on average 6 people riding per hour, and that's transit wide. That's not bus wide. That's not vehicle wide.
Mhm.
That's transit wide. They
Right.
had in 2023, they had 12 buses. I don't know how many they're running around the city at any given time. I'm sure there's a couple, maybe, I don't know. I don't know how many they have on any given hour, but that's all you had. So, it's very inefficient. If you want to talk about cuts, that would be one thing to really look into. They got to make it more efficient. They
Well,
have to.
no,
Contrast that with the senior center. Senior center has only seen in 6 years, has only seen an increase in its expenditures of like 3.9% or something. Very, very modest when you're talking about looking at these different department expenditures in Marion, especially in light of, as we were saying, the hyperinflationary environment that we found ourselves in this
Mhm.
country. So, good job to the senior center. Hopefully, everybody, all the seniors out there are loving it, um, and because you guys haven't broken the piggy bank too much. Now, people are going to say, well, they had a negative balance too. Yeah, they do. So maybe they need to look at shoring up that negative balance by maybe increasing their membership. It's $30 a year. So maybe you just take whatever your deficiency was on that front between your revenues and you get a little bit closer. So you're taking less money out of the general fund.
Yeah.
Those are the things that they got to think about. But as far as a expenditure standpoint, it's only been like 3%. They had an uptick of expenditures in 2023. Here we are at 2023 again. And that was due to storm damage and a lot of maintenance, facility maintenance that was necessitated in 2023. So again, those are the questions, those are the things that uh, each of these department heads, the city leaders need to go through. Not all department budgets are equal, right, Robert?
Absolutely. I mean, the majority of what the city does is police and fire. Everybody knows that. Very critical services to our community, obviously. I do want to kind of go back when we were kind of talking about the fire department, because that was kind of a hot topic. And I want to play devil's advocate here because there were some people, commenting, criticizing your recent article, which I felt was unfair. And not just because you're my friend, Cody, and we work together, but I don't think they really understood your true intent with the article. I think there was just like this intent to misunderstand what you were saying because it was just honest dialogue. So before I go to that, let me talk about back in, I want to say it was 2018. It was my first year on council. I actually had to go do a tour of the firehouse downtown with Chuck Dean and some others and inspected how bad the building really was. I mean, there was a leak coming through the basement walls. There was some bowing in the floors. And that's why, and I think to this day still, that they don't put the fire trucks on the bay floor, even after it was reinforced, because it would have collapsed. So the need was there. It was really crumbling. And so naturally, as a department head and as somebody who wants the very best for his firefighters, you're going to try to get the most money you can and get the best equipment you can. But then you have your administrators; they got to balance the financial need, right? So it's this push pull. Um, but coming back to the article that you wrote, so this was just your attempt to have an honest dialogue. You saw a need. You have a very good perspective, a very good analysis of the current situation. You weren't anti-fire. You weren't, hey, let's fire everybody and they should operate on pennies. I mean, this is kind of goes back to my point earlier. It's unfortunate we can't have these conversations because as soon as you have a perspective, you're attacked as if you're anti-fire or you're something or another. And then, but when we make a point, or if they make a point, I'm sorry, if they make a point, then it's always valid. This was a very well written article, and I know it took you a lot of time to write this article. This is the type of stuff we should be able to talk about. And that's why I wanted to bring that up. I want us to talk about it. Cody, I know you have a lot of thoughts on that. You wanted to kind of elaborate on that article as well.
Yeah, it's not, as I clearly state, firefighting is a legitimate government purpose. It's a legitimate government service because you have a vested interest as a community, as a collective, as a city, so that if there's a private owner that has a private structure on his private property, there's a fire there that spreads to the neighbor and that neighbor and then engulfs the entire city and burns it down.
Mm-hmm.
The whole city then has an interest in making sure that that doesn't happen.
Right.
So there's no question, if you want to talk about small government, fiscally conservative, free market principles, it doesn't violate that. It's the same argument with streets, sewers.
Right.
You need them as a community because you all use them, and no one person is going to own them privately. So that's the question in my mind typically, is whether or not it is a legitimate government purpose. If there's a alternative in the private sector, chances are that alternative in the private sector is going to be more efficient,
Mm-hmm.
more proficient, more cost effective, and a better option than to collectivize it, socialize it in the form of a government service. So firefighting is not something that we can do that with. Now, EMS, there's an argument. There's an argument to be made. It was private back in the day. You would contact a company like in Marion, you'd contact Stop Check, ambulance service. If you had a situation where you needed to be transported to the hospital. Now, that all changed in the 70s, 80s. You started getting this taxpayer funded government service, EMS service. And, I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing in all circumstances, but it too needs to be looked at from a efficiency standpoint. Is it operating in the most efficient way?
And that's your point. That was literally your entire point with that article, is it not?
Exactly. And that's what it has. You have to look at that with every single department. And that's all I'm saying. And you have to have the right mindset to say, is this a legitimate government purpose? Should the taxpayers be funding this service, whatever it is? It's one thing if you're super wealthy, if you've got more money than King Midas and everything you touch turns to gold, then okay, you want to have this specialized service or whatever, then I guess have at it. But the thing is, we are in a rough financial shape, not only in the city of Marion, but in the country.
So when I look at this stuff, man, like compared to you, I'm a novice with the finances. You guys are teaching me good, but so when I look at this, I don't see anything about any of us making a suggestion to axe anything. We're looking at the finances more finely tuned now because of what we know and what we've been researching, a lot of which hasn't been released yet. So we have Cody, who's actually in finance, who's digging through this stuff and then presenting the findings. And there's a lot of inefficiency from what I'm gathering in some of these departments, and that's important.
Yeah, and I don't know what else to say. I'm not saying to necessarily take a chainsaw to any department, especially the fire department, but getting defensive when you start talking about the realities as far as number of calls. I think that's another thing. People probably don't really know how many structure fires actually occur in the city of Marion. It's not really a discussion that comes up. Now, you may think, and Lord knows nobody wants it to be their place. So, you know, I get it. You want to have that comfort, that assurance that if something did happen, God forbid, some trained professionals are going to be there to take care of it. It is a fraction. So we got to look and we got to say, okay, hands down, it's only like 0.84% of all incidents in 2023. The fire department was called. 0.84% were actual structure fires. The rest, overwhelmingly, were medical calls.
Right.
So I think we need more data on that if we're trying to look at like from an efficiency standpoint. If we're going to have EMS be socialized through government, which we've had that for 40 years, 50 years, we need to just know the specifics on that.
Cody,
Is there ways to make it more efficient, to save money on that? We know that that's what these dollars are primarily going towards.
hmm
So, is there room for anything? I mean, how many people? I know it happens. Everybody knows that it happens. That you get somebody that stubs their toe and they call the squad, and then when they send them out, they're sending out the fire truck, and you're like, well, there's no fire here, so why are you sending the fire truck? These are just questions that I think need to be had, and to try to improve things. And
hmm
maybe it's 100% optimal right now. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't know. But now is the time to have the discussion when we're in fiscal caution. And nationally, I mean, this inflation isn't going anywhere. That's the thing. If you think that uh, your Big Mac's going to go from $6 or $7 or whatever the hell it costs now as a national average, if you think it's going back down to $3, it ain't. It
No.
ain't. This shit ain't going in
Well,
reverse.
Cody, I would like to mention that maybe we should look at something. Now would be a perfect time to talk about maybe a countywide EMS structure like Delaware. Delaware County has a countywide EMS structure.
I
Um,
think that's a great thing to consider, Robert.
yeah, I mean, because there's been talks about a potential merger between like Marion City Fire and Marion Township Fire, but because of the funding mechanisms between property tax and the millage rate, and I forget, I'm kind of a little fuzzy because I've kind of had some meetings with some officials in the past about that. And so I know that's a little bit of a bigger undertaking, but a countywide EMS would be a little bit easier, I believe. Again, unless I'm missing something, I think it would be a little bit easier of an undertaking because since most of those calls and most of your mutual aid is coming from EMS, it would make sense. Now, I'm going to go kind of on a record, and they'll probably call me crazy for this, but I actually believe that we could potentially benefit from a full merger between Marion City and Marion County, but that's besides the point. Maybe we can get into that down the road. But as we've seen with Marion Public Health, we've gotten some efficiencies there. we could potentially get some efficiencies with EMS. At some point, like I said, you're going to have, half of your government is merged together between the city of Marion and Marion County. But at minimum, the EMS thing is something that we should look at. One last thing.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just say one last thing. And with the fiscal caution, remember, this is a caution. This isn't a crisis. This isn't an emergency. It doesn't mean it couldn't be, but as we have shown, we have $10 million in the bank. I don't know if, maybe that argument is being overplayed. I think the reason why Bill, Mr. Collins is bringing that in is because New World's reporting has been so out of whack. They don't know on a book sense fully with some of those line items where they stand. So I think that's just him saying, "Hey, until we know more about what our books look like, we're not comfortable." And then with some of those just rapidly increasing costs, like as you shown, I forget what the increase was for fire and some other departments. You did some pretty
Fire was
good.
like 22.22%, if I
Yeah,
recall off the top of my head, in 6 years.
yeah, you did some pretty good research there. So that's what we're talking about, folks. Like, and getting in the comments and calling an article reckless is itself reckless because you're automatically discrediting somebody who is spending hours of research and time for free to just say, "Hey, this is a perspective. Let's talk about this."
Yeah, what's reckless is being on council for 14 years, 16 years, whatever it is,
20.
and 20 years, and overseeing all this and
Yeah.
not being out, really doing anything about it. So, you know, how much time how much time are they spending going over these vocal critics, these people that want to attack and stuff?
Mhm.
How much time are they spending going over years of reports and creating charts and trying to analyze things and asking questions and publishing it to the community, trying to allow people to understand? Because fact of the matter is, most people don't follow the local politics. Most people will not go and research an audit report. They will not go and analyze budget worksheets and stuff like that. That just doesn't happen. Most people don't go to their city council meetings. Most people have no clue who their council representatives are, who their mayor is, who their auditor is. That's just a fact. I bet if you sent a survey out to the roughly 35,000 people in the city of Marion, let's say 25,000 of those are over the age of 18. I would say probably 95% have no clue about anything that I just talked about. And that's just the reality
Yeah.
that we're in as a country, as a culture, as a nation. And it's not just here, it's pervasive, it's everywhere. So um, you know, the other part, kind of following up on what you were saying, is it's a good time to maybe consider some alternative systems and organizations, alternative structures for something like fire EMS. And I think that is absolutely true. Like, use this as an opportunity to go through all this stuff in depth, ask the questions: what's going to be most efficient, what's going to be most proficient, what's going to put us in the best position long term in a sustainable way. Because there's a big, huge elephant that nobody wants to talk about in this country, and in particular in our area. It is demographic issues. Okay. The city of Marion, Marion County, Crawford County, Morrow County, you name it. We're dying off. We're aging, not having children. Replacement rate, if you talk to a demographer, is like 2.1 children per family.
Yeah.
This area is like, I think Marion City, it's like 1.5, 1.6. In the county, I think it's 1.1 or 1.2. And all these baby boomers, they're retiring. So from an income tax standpoint, city of Marion leaders, when these people hit Social Security, Your income tax is on earned income only.
Yeah,
So what does that mean, Robert? That means if you're on Social Security, you don't pay the income tax to the city of Marion. So you're going to see a decline with that as more people retire, more people get on Social Security. Who's going to be making up the shortfall? And that is the number one source of general fund revenue in the city of Marion is the income tax, right?
absolutely. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, not having a plan in place to, when you give a 0.5% rebate on income tax, if they want to talk about reckless, I mean, let's be fair, that's kind of reckless. Not, if you're saying that, you're not going to work as many hours at your job, Cody, but you want to maintain your lifestyle, you're probably delusional, correct? Like, the math is not going to math.
You're absolutely right. If you want to cut your income, you want to give a tax break, which I'm all in favor of. Again, I'm in favor of small government, just the bare necessities of things with legitimate government or legitimate purpose, and having that low tax burden because you're not funding all these different government services of questionable efficiency or necessity. But if you're going to cut taxes, you gotta cut spending. Otherwise, then you're going to be losing ground there, fella.
Right.
You
And
know?
that's what I mean, let's be fair. I mean, we're not afraid to call out both sides, right, Cody? I mean, you and I, Jay, we talk about rhinos, Republicans in name only all the time. I mean, look at the Republicans at the federal level. They will, let's talk about Trump. Okay. We love Trump, for the most part. Obviously he's got his own issues too, just like everybody else. But he had the Trump tax cuts, but then we didn't make it up with, huge spending cuts. We had deficit
Right.
spending. It was just, it's a fair statement. And you and I are against that. I mean, if we're going to have tax cuts, let's have the spending cuts to go with it. That is what true fiscal conservatism is. Let's just be
Yeah,
sound financially.
exactly. 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And that's what people need to realize across the board. City of Marion, state of Ohio, federal government. That's what fiscal conservatism is you have to be responsible. So yeah, if you're talking about a tax cut, you got to realize, okay, I'm gonna have less revenue. So unless I'm going to be going into deficits and whatnot, and the city of Marion cannot do that, the federal government can because they'll just use the Federal Reserve to print more money and buy more treasury bonds, buy more debt. So they're up at the top of the pyramid under this pyramid scheme that is, the economy of the United States.
Right.
Um, we don't have that luxury. So,
Right.
all right, we'll try to move on to the next topic. The uh, meeting last night, council meeting. We had a very, 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 very long-winded presentation on the commercial building, in code enforcement guy. Mr. Shaver came once again and talked and talked and talked, to the point where you were like, get on with it. Nobody cares about
Yes.
it.
Yes.
And I know people do care. People care. I get it. Like, and we've talked about it before, Robert. I don't really want to talk to you anymore on that issue. I don't know what's best, whether or not having this company that's going to be doing the inspections on commercial buildings in Marion will improve the process. Will it make it
Man,
faster? I,
I'm
I don't I don't know.
I agree.
That's not my line.
I'm so fatigued with that issue. I feel like Marion has just talked about building codes and permits and all that stuff for years. And I will admit it's not my favorite topic. I'm not most interested. I know Councilman Neff was very, very passionate about it. And he's a great resource. Maybe we can, or former Councilman Neff, I'm sorry, maybe we can get him on sometime and he can kind of talk about it because I believe he's an inspector at a nearby town. So he could probably give us more perspective. But yeah, I really don't have an opinion on that one way or another. I'm not as knowledgeable when it comes to that topic.
Yeah, I mean, there's, as I understand it, listening to the hour-long discussions that they have in these meetings and stuff, and then also some commentary on social media from different people, it seems to be pretty split. You got developers, you got contractors of all shapes and sizes that have an opinion one way or the other. So do whatever you guys, the professionals, the people that impact. It's a very small group. I mean, how many how many commercial renovation projects aren't happening anywhere or are happening in the city of Marion? There's only a handful of them, and they're mainly in downtown Marion.
Right.
So, figure it out, make a decision. Hopefully, it'll be good. Um, Kind of the top most, I don't know, drama filled portion of the meeting last night involved the proposal that was made by Councilman Ayers Ratliff a couple meetings ago, or maybe it was last meeting, last regular session, I think maybe, to have the city give $25,000 to somebody for food assistance. Now, when it was initially proposed, that was when the federal government shutdown was still ongoing. That was when SNAP benefits, food assistance, what people might say in the old days, food stamps were suspended for people. He proposed giving $25,000. And the original proposal was to take it out of the opioid settlement funds. Now, none of this was pre-prepared. It wasn't drafted up. I think it was brought up um, on matters not on the agenda. I don't even think it was on under new business when that came up, and it was just kind of ad hoc. It was, well, because everybody was talking about it politically. It's very expedient. You go out there and you say, "Oh, well, we want to do all this," and we think it's, yeah, people are going to get behind that because nobody wants anybody to go hungry in this country.
Right.
And if you look at the average American, nobody is going hungry in this country. We're all a bunch of fat asses. But I digress. So,
You
you
kill me,
know,
bro.
the opioid settlement fund, they said, well, where are we going to get the money? We're broke. We're in this fiscal distress situation. Well, we got this drug settlement money. It's not like we don't have a bunch of people that are addicted to drugs in this city. Let's just take it from them. Let's take $25,000 from money that was given to us because we went through this heroin is Marion's economy and this drug epidemic, and people and their families are suffering, you know, and this is the money that the state of Ohio received from
Yes.
the drug companies
Yes.
who manufactured all these opioids. They got this money, and the state said, here you go, Marion. We know you were a victim of this drug epidemic, this opioid crisis.
Mhm.
So here's some money and use it for these purposes. Use it to help the victims of that opioid crisis in your community. Use it for drug treatment programs. Use it for this service for victims of this horrible crisis.
Right.
That's what it was meant for. And then you've got Ayers Ratliff and Aaron Rollins and all these people that say, let's take it. Let's take it from them. Who gives a crap about the victims, the many victims in our community of drugs? We don't need no stinking drug treatment programs and things to fund and whatnot. Let's give it in the form of food assistance. Well, at the beginning, when SNAP was still suspended, okay, I guess if you want to make an argument that that was appropriate at the time, that private charity isn't an option, food banks, things like that, all these churches and everything, it was really heartwarming to see. I mean, there
Yeah.
were all these different private individuals coming together, going to their churches, donating to their food banks to help their fellow man, as it should be. Private initiative, volunteer effort, not compulsion by government. So I can see somewhat of an argument that way. But last night it was brought up, correctly so, that the SNAP program, the shutdown ended, I think, on the 12th of November. SNAP payments, regular payments, plus retroactive payments resumed as of the 21st. So anybody that was enrolled in SNAP, they got the regular payment and they got what they didn't get during the shutdown. Okay? So it was brought up by Councilman Ralph Smith and Councilwoman Twyla Lang that, hey, we're in a fiscal crisis here. We don't even really know our finances. This is also coming from the opioid settlement fund. It says nothing about that. It talks about SNAP. It doesn't even mention anything connecting it to the drug epidemic, the opioid settlement fund. It mentions nothing. The ordinance mentions nothing about that. It does not connect it to that in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
But by God, they drafted it that and tried to connect it to say that they can use opioid settlement funds for that purpose. So anyway, Councilman Smith, Councilwoman Lang said, it's over. These people, so now we're just what? Giving them $25,000 for seconds or dessert? I don't know. All
Well,
I know is I would rather have that money go to the intended recipients, the victims in that time when that was a really bad crisis in this area. I would also like it to be used to prevent other people in this community that are alive today, help prevent them from falling victim that destroys your life. And maybe that $25,000 that they pretty much needlessly, because SNAP benefits have resumed and they got their retroactive payments. I'd rather have that $25,000 be used to help prevent any more people from having their lives destroyed by opioids. Wouldn't you, Robert?
absolutely. So, and I've mentioned this before about how this topic's kind of near and dear to my heart because I've had family members killed over this situation. Let's talk about how many people and how many of these kids are starving because mommy and daddy are strung out on drugs. How many people are even adults themselves? They're going hungry because they're spending all their money on drugs. So that is a serious crisis that has been going on in Marion for 15, maybe 20 years. I don't know. And it needs to be addressed. And that's why the settlement existed, was to fix that. And then you get Oscar worthy performances from Councilman Ratliff in tears, on his way out. He needs a PR move, it appears, to, try to justify this and pull on heartstrings. And we don't, and it's funny how he wants to talk about Christianity and stuff in his posts, and then wants to act like this abusive pastor pulling, the guilt card on people. We are, as you mentioned earlier, Cody, we already seen our community come together during the government shutdown to meet the need. Now, is it going to be perfect? No. But you can also argue that with this $25,000 benefit, that's not going to be perfect. So what you were basically saying is that this $1 million settlement for the opioid crisis was intended for that, to solve the opioid crisis. If we were able to put a major dent in that, think of how many families are restored. Think of how many kids might have a dad that's got a job and he's putting food on the table and doesn't need SNAP benefits. Now, I get it. There's people that are working and they still need SNAP benefits. I know there's elderly that need SNAP benefits. I get that. I'm making the point that uh, there's families that are being impacted by decisions. These kids, their parents are not making good decisions, and they are suffering the consequences. And to sit here and say that the private initiative is not working, I think is blatantly false. It's undermining what churches and charities are doing. And in fact, they were criticizing us, Cody, for that post about SNAP benefits and saying we want people to go hungry. And they don't know the work you and I do in our churches and in our community and with families and things like that behind the scenes. But we also don't have to parade it around and go take pictures and make posts about volunteering for a charity here in Marion. So
Exactly.
it's just gaslighting.
It is. It's gaslighting. It's hypocrisy. It's disgusting to, everybody, if there's a legitimate need, somebody who genuinely is in need. Now, personally, I think that the private sector, private charity, I think that is the appropriate, not government welfare. Not only be it's a matter of efficiency again. Okay? So if you make $1 and then the government taxes you, takes that money, and then they redistribute it in the form of a welfare payment to somebody,
Right.
how much of that dollar gets taken out to pay that bureaucrat who took your dollar to redistribute it to somebody else? They're giving themselves a cut. Government doesn't operate for free. Okay. We
Right.
know that. So the more efficient way to help somebody over here is if government doesn't take your money in taxes and you then have that full purchasing power, that full dollar to then
Yeah. I would like to
donate directly.
I would like to put my charitable donations up against their charitable donations and show that over the years I've donated more than they have because of the amount of money I've personally invested in my local church and charities. I know I've given even when I didn't even really have it to give. And so I don't like this, you know, it's just it goes back to this whole culture war too. I mean, they're attacking our faith, Cody. They're, and then they want us to talk about solutions and stay away from their hypocrisy. But we can't. We can't have these honest conversations. To your point about Councilman Ratliff. I even saw this guy just this past weekend at the zoo with my family. I was there. He was there with his family. Walked by the guy. I said hello like 3 times before he acknowledged me. I mean, at what point do you just not even try to talk to these people? I mean, the guy didn't like me when I was on council before the whole auditor situation. So there's an absolute hatred coming from their side. And, when they start these arguments and then we come up with our defenses and our arguments, then it just escalates it because they want us to go to our corner and shut up and be quiet. And that's just not going to happen. We all have a right to actually sit at the table. And if you want to talk, then let's talk. But when you continue on with this gaslighting and with these attacks, we just can't do it. And then we're obviously going to fight back. So it was an Oscar-worthy performance. We'll give him that. And then, unfortunately, Councilman Rollins yelled at Councilwoman Lang. And kind of participated in the show. And that was disappointing. I kind of expected better from Councilman Rollins. Him and I haven't always seen eye to eye. But I've always liked Councilman Rollins, and that was just disappointing to see. Even if you felt like it was a legitimate government purpose, those were his words. He is like, if one purpose is for government is to provide food for people.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just got to interject here. The
Yeah.
biggest, the most important, the most legitimate purpose is for government to feed the citizenry.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what we're hearing from this socialist slash communist Mondani in New York City. He wants to open these government run grocery stores in, I think, 5 or 6 boroughs in New York at insane cost. So,
Right.
it's a disconnect from, you're either a free market capitalist, believes in the individual and sovereignty and stuff like that, or you're big government, or you're a socialist, or you're a communist. That government is the be all end all and should provide for the mutual welfare of everybody. So,
So
you know,
Right.
with
that's what it comes down to. That's what that is indicates to me, and it's unfortunate. It really is, especially at the local level, with somebody that claims to be a Republican.
No, I think he claims to be a libertarian, but still even worse. I mean, aren't libertarians worse than us conservatives about, like, they want like no government involvement in anything. So that's kind of what I was expecting from him. I mean, no harm, no foul, Mr. Rollins. Like, if you believe that, so be it. You have a right to your opinion. But we also have a right to our opinion. So that, again, that's all we're saying. We're speaking on articles and things that we're writing because we're giving people in Marion a perspective. And so, these baseless attacks are just they're getting crazy.
Yeah, Marion
Yeah.
Watch got started in the addiction um, epidemic after we lost a relative of my late performing arts instructor, Joanne Cook, and that little guy right there in the middle holding the sign at the bottom that says you can stop overdose death. That is me and Melissa's son, and the same guy right above that, and when all the pictures with the sheriff and I, that's the same little boy.
Yeah.
And it's efforts like the efforts of the citizens who stepped up. I don't think Marion had the money. Now that we look at the books a lot closer, from 1980 all the way to now, it's been exhaustive. And to look at the books in 2009, 2010, all the way up until pretty recently, I don't think they had the money to enforce it. So it was people like Brad Belcher, people that put their money where their mouth is, that were able to keep families from losing people. And this little guy right here is a miracle from that epidemic. Melissa was a 10-year IV heroin addict, and she started because they prescribed her Oxycontin at the age of about 9 or 10 for Behçet's disease. And, she lost her insurance briefly, and the withdrawals from Oxycontin are not pretty. So she went broke trying to buy pills. This is a trend. It's 4 out of 5 heroin addicts started with prescription medications.
Mhm.
And she eventually had to, because of the cost of Oxycontin on the street, go to heroin. And then, she was an IV heroin addict. But after she recovered and Javen was born and he was healthy. So, yeah.
And
So
just
this folks and Jay, sorry but this is something that those opioid funds could have been
Mhm.
used for.
Mhm.
Programmings like this, things are going to help the next little boy, who had a family that was, you know, that cannot be ignored. And not to mention, as I stated, the ordinance itself was not drafted correctly structurally. It should have referenced, it should have tied it in to that this is something. They could have said probably that due to the shutdown or whatever, uh, periodic uh, pause in SNAP payments that could or that would impact people who are in drug recovery or victims of the opioid uh,
Right.
epidemic in Marion. They should have tied it tied it together, tied it with that. Because if you read that ordinance, there ain't nothing that mentions that.
Right.
They're literally saying because SNAP was suspended, we want to give $25,000. They don't have any of the details in there, So we don't even know. Yeah, they're going to now, as of last night, they said we're going to donate $5,000 to Peanut Butter and Jelly Truck, $5,000 to Salvation Army, $5,000 here, $5,000 there. Okay, that's good. Those are all good charities. I'm not saying that they don't do. They're private entities. They do a great job.
Yeah.
But SNAP is allegedly needs based. It goes off of your uh, household income and whether or not your percentage, how many people live in your household, that sort of thing. This is supposed to be, even though they've resumed and they've got their back payments, what's the framework to make sure that this goes to people with qualifying income amounts? What makes this go, how are they going to ensure that this goes to people that I guess had suspensions in their SNAP benefits periodically, even though they've been back and they've received their retroactive pay? None of that was put in there. None of it. So literally, like, if you go somewhere, there's nothing preventing somebody that was a million, and not to say it's going to happen, not too many millionaires are going around to different. I mean, I get it, but there's nothing as far as that framework that was put into it.
Yeah.
It was just thrown together because it was politically expedient, and maybe some of them had genuine desire to, help at the time when there was actually arguably a valid purpose. But that valid purpose was completely gone with the wind as of last night, and it was just turned into political showmanship. And as Robert said, the Oscar-winning performance of 3 seconds of choking back tears, and then immediately transitioning into attacks on anybody that dare question it. And
Right.
Ralph Smith, I'll give him credit because he sees the writing on the wall. He's not somebody that's just looking at the line in front of him. If he's on a book, he's not just looking at that line and going line by line. Ralph's somebody that skims ahead and then goes back and reads in detail. He knows that this resumption is temporary. Temporary. We're probably going to have another shutdown coming up in a month.
Likely. Yeah. And this goes
It's
back,
highly likely.
this goes
So
back to,
he was saying, let me just finish this real quick.
yeah.
He was saying, let's keep our powder dry. We don't
Yeah.
need to expend these opioid funds right now on this, but maybe we will if there's another shutdown and they're suspended. Maybe we can step in a timely fashion, have everything ready to go, have it thought out. How are we going to administer this to make sure it goes to the right people? What's going to be the most efficient? What's going to be the most proficient? That's what a responsible person would do. And nope, nope, nope. He's evil. He's heartless. He's a bad man. You cannot challenge anything. Aaron Rollins and Ayers Ratliff spoke, and they got applause by a couple people that were there at the council meeting. So that's it. Everything else is wrong, 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 Robert.
Yeah. And I know you're going to close this out as usual, Cody. I just want to give my final thoughts here. And everybody knows I'm faith-based, even as much as these opponents want to say we want to be Christians or whatever. Really don't care about that. My perspective here is, even though we're fiscal conservatives and so on, we've seen the culture war start to come to Marion with the No Kings protest, right? We've talked about that. We've had Anthony Azaria on, who was very pro No Kings protest. We're not opposed to having people with opposite viewpoints on the show. For me, this really all comes back to uh, morality and the heart of our nation. And when we have weak families, when we have weak fathers, we have absent fathers, you have a weak family. And when you have a weak family, you have a weak nation. And I think that's what we're seeing here across this country is, our kids are growing up confused. They don't know whether they're a boy or girl. And I'm not going to be ashamed to say that as a conservative, as a Christian, uh, there's parents that are advocating for this. And people are just confused about their identity, who they are. They're using drugs, and that further exacerbates the problem. And then it creates a crisis of, okay, now the kid doesn't have food. Now mom is, in crisis, and now she's got to try to be a single mom or whatever. My point is that, and Cody, being the historian, you could probably correct me on this. Was it Benjamin Franklin that said that the republic was only adequate for a moral and religious people? Maybe it was John Adams. I can't remember off the top of my
John
head.
Adams, I do.
John Adams. And our founding father laid that foundation. As much as liberals want to say otherwise and that we weren't founded as a Christian nation, even if we weren't a Christian nation, we were at least founded on Judeo-Christian principles. And our founding fathers even said as much in their own words that this nation was meant for religious and moral people. And so when we get away from that, that's where we're seeing the division. This is where we're seeing the hatred. This is where we're seeing institutional failure. This is where we're seeing moral degradation. So until we can really fix the heart and soul of our nation, we're going to continue having these problems. We can band-aid them with good fiscal policy. We can band-aid them with efficiencies and things like that. But even if let's say our city government gets back to, I can't think of the top bond rating off the top of my head, but let's say we get back and we can get to a top bond rating. Well, we still have families where fathers and mothers are strung out on drugs and, not coming home. A child loses their mom and dad from an overdose. That is still happening. And it's actually happening more than people might expect. They think that it's kind of simmered down since 2008 and 2012. Yeah, it's not to that level, but it's still a crisis. And until we can actually use those opioid settlement funds to create services, create programs, education, get faith-based institutions involved, we're going to continue having those problems. And then we're going to have half our community on food stamps still. We've got to fix families. Just no ifs, ands, or buts. That's my final say.
Exactly, 100% agree with you. This country, not only fiscally, as far as debt, spending, all that, inflation, is not in good shape, but we've had a moral rot for 60 years that's just gotten worse and worse and worse. I guess you would say a rot or a cancer. And you talk about the history of this country, we need a great awakening. We need an enlightenment again. I'm not confident of it. Personally, I think that you have to almost probably have some catastrophic incident that would bind people together again, rebuilding of society from a cultural standpoint, if nothing else. And that's kind of where we're at, unfortunately. And you can have all the fiscal responsibility or wealth if your people are immoral, if your people are degenerate, if they don't know right from wrong, they don't believe in objective truth. It's a philosophical question as much as it is cultural. Um, you either say everything is subjective, everything is relative, or you believe in objective truth. And um, we have a lot of disagreement on a lot of fronts. It's a very divisive time to be alive in this country. It's unfortunate that people can't sit and have a discussion, can't talk. on these matters. But typically now, if you do have a relationship with somebody of the opposite political persuasion, it doesn't last very long. They're probably going to defriend you and view you then as an enemy, somebody to be hated, even if you don't feel the same way about them, and even if you've tried to help them and be there for them and be a good friend, and you just realize that we don't disagree, but we can agree to disagree. So I do. Before we go, I want to give Jay the last, just a real brief topic. The cybersecurity did come up again. That's another bogus um, issue as far as what Jacob Bolden, the IT manager for the city of Marion, who's been in that position since 2014, commenting basically that this is kind of standard, and nothing was wrong. There was no issues with New World. Um, I will point out, interestingly, when they did their annual report in 2023, which is why I've been comparing a lot of my budgets, because in that they talk in detail about figures and departments and what their accomplishments were and what their revenues. It's a very good report. So Mr. Bolden, he actually talks about the IT department in 2023 as far as their accomplishments and what they did. I saw nothing about New World or system audits, IT audits, anything like that that would indicate like a hands-on approach in the New World software, the financial software, accounting software for the city of Marion. So I don't know how much involvement in depth. I don't know, but
Right.
it's Jay. What are your takeaways on what was discussed?
So I'll run through this real quick. It's actually pretty simple. So the $5,000 audit that they're talking about is what I would consider a spot check audit. It basically checks current security and blah, blah, blah. A forensic IT audit, on the other hand, is a very laser focused audit, extremely in depth. And I estimate if they're able to do it between 2009 going forward, it would take anywhere between 36 to 48 months. So what they're talking about, they are miscategorizing. That is not a forensic audit. Secondly, the way that they downplayed the importance of a ticket system is highly concerning. Mr. Ralph Smith reached out to me about that late last night. I was, passed out because I've been running back and forth and on the phone with doctors and blah, blah, blah for, all the crazy that's going on. But a ticketing system. I've taken over IT departments with an upwards of 1,000 employees. And one of my coworkers is from a data center from when I worked a long time ago. A really good friend of mine is supposed to be coming on with us tomorrow. And he hit me up about this ticket thing. The first thing I did when I took over that particular facility, and Bobby's going to join us tomorrow night, was implement a ticket system. Because without a ticket system, you're making verbal requests, you're making email requests, which can be deleted, and there's no accountability. It also serves to help you with troubleshooting. So if you have a problem that was complicated and 10 years later there's a different dude in the position, he can go back under the categories and see what steps you took to fix that. It also tracks permissions. There should be no work, not even changing a mouse, without a trouble ticket. So that's my first thing. As far as the cybersecurity thing, I do think they need to pass it, but immediately revisit it. I would like to see the access controls and the ticketing system be implemented into it. I did throw this forensic audit URL in the comments on the broadcast on Facebook. I'm not going to go all the way through this because it'd take too long, but we'll go into this a little bit more. So the audit that they're talking about, the $5,000 one, all the things that they're talking about looking at would be done by that firm. Part of the package deal. So as I understand it, by talking to officials and not just in Marion, is that the auditor of state did what I would call a spot check audit several years ago. And that's not going to catch anything when they did that. You know what I mean? And what we need to look at is the entire scope of the software, because period, we have proven that it was flawed. We have proven that our theories were correct. It is proven that the software controls were misconfigured from the beginning, including the reconciliation module. All these things are legally mandatory. So that's not even a question anymore. And we have some pretty strong evidence about password sharing by a former, being demanded by a former deputy auditor, maybe other people, and shared credentials, physical security breaches in the server room. All these things, when you add them all up, just the password sharing and the misconfigured software and all the money that's, the deficits and all the crazy, that is justification alone for a very thorough forensic IT audit. So whoever's saying that, I really have to question their credentials, honestly. And I'm sitting here chatting with Bobby, my former coworker right now, and she's saying the same thing. She's like, why didn't they do this when they found out the controls were off? I think the earliest record we have of them admitting that is 2022. So the law director and the other people that know the laws, the IT guy who had to have known this stuff was going on, there is no explanation whatsoever. There's no excuse that can be given. There's no scapegoat here, guys. The IT guy is the guardian of the IT system, and he would have known that this was going on. And I hate to, put it that bluntly, but that's the fact. So he's responsible for keeping these systems safe. And if a superior comes to you as an IT manager and tells you, hey, I need you to elevate my permissions to an inappropriate level, and we have screenshots of that too, we're going to talk about tomorrow. I'm actually going to show them. The answer is no, period. I don't care if it's the mayor, because it is unethical. It's against segregation of duties. It can cause problems. It breaks the audit trail. These permissions and the widespread access with no business justification to the New World system that has now been verified by multiple officials in the Collins administration, as well as the former administration and the public, is a serious, serious problem. That's about all I have on that till we talk nerdy tomorrow.
Yeah, as always, there's more nerdy content in the Watchmen's report forthcoming. So stay tuned for that. But it is a very valid discussion and one that needs delved into more, especially in light of the city passing this. It is. Nobody ever said it was anything other than something that was mandated by the state. That's 100% true as far as cybersecurity. If you're talking about protecting against some Nigerian hacker or some Russian hacker, yes, they want to prevent that from being an issue. But what our contention is, based on review of the old audit reports, of the minutes going all the way back to 2009, there are chronic issues in the New World software, and there needs to be proper policies and procedures put in place to make sure that
Right.
moving forward, those are not the chronic issues that they have been heretofore. Big word for you. Means from one point in time up until today. So, little English lesson for you there, little vocabulary. You learn a lot on the Watchmen's report, don't you, boys?
Absolutely.
All right, so we've got the geek session. We also have Ralph Smith coming on, right? What day is that?
I don't know, what day is this?
That's tomorrow. He's coming on tomorrow.
Ralph's coming on tomorrow, so lots more to talk with Mr. Ralph Smith tomorrow. So be sure to tune in. Same bat time, same bat channel, as they said back in the old Adam West days, I believe, of the Batman show. Okay, so we've already said our final. Anybody want to say one last thing to our beloved viewers?
No. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it.
Yes, that's
I feel like
good.
I feel like I should be like a YouTuber, like and subscribe.
Yeah, check out our YouTube. Go like, subscribe on our YouTube, which is what, Jay? What's the
Marion Watch 43302. It should match the Facebook URL, except for
Yeah.
YouTube.
check that out. Sometimes if there's like issues with the stream on Facebook, if you're watching the live stream, those same issues do not present themselves on the video that's uploaded to YouTube. So if you do hit that hiccup or something on here, then make sure you check it out on the YouTube channel. So all right, that's it for me. So for Robert Landon, for Jason Foreman, I'm Cody Higley, and this has been the Watchman's Report. And remember, folks, a watchman is always vigilant. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.